First, if you were to read Hebrews 1, which we didn't have time to do it tonight, but basically the idea in Hebrews 1, which is carried into the text we just read, is that Jesus is a king. He's this incredibly powerful radiance of the glory of God, the exact imprint of his nature, that he is the creator and sustainer of the universe. The text says that he sustains the universe by the word of his power. It's just this image of this incredibly powerful king, but almost like night and day, when you get to chapter 2, he shifts and he says, this is not your normal king. This is not a king who sits on his throne and exercises power detached from his citizens. This isn't a king who's power hungry. This is a king who gives his power away. This is a king who gets involved. And that's exactly what Christmas is. Christmas is a perfect display of King Jesus, who didn't have to, but chose to get involved. He didn't just send his battlers into battle while he sat in relative safety on his throne. He got down off of his throne. He made himself vulnerable. He took a risk when he became a human being, and didn't just take a risk. He took the risk knowing he would have to give his life. He's a king who got involved. You ever see an accident on the road and you kind of feel bad, but you don't really do anything? You just keep driving? Raise your hand. I'm just kidding. Don't raise your hand. But we all do it, right? We've all been there, except for those really precious saints in our midst. But I think we've all probably done it. Or you see something happening and something in you wants to help, but instead you just kind of look. I better not get involved. It's not my place. In New York City, you see this happen all the time. There's a story about a lady who was just brutally beaten, and there were a record number of 30 people who watched it happen and didn't even call for help. They just looked. And that is not what you have with King Jesus. He heard the cries of his people. He heard their pain. And yet he didn't just stand there and look. He actually got down. He came. He got involved. He exposed himself. He became vulnerable. Took a risk knowing it was going to cost him everything. Jesus is the king who got involved. So kids, what's the first point? Jesus is he's the king. He's the king who got involved.